What's going on in the Israel-Hamas War? Why is Iran threatening to attack Israel directly? And who were Ismail Haniyeh and Fuad Shukr who were assassinated this week? I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive deep into the latest on the Israel-Hamas War. The largest developments of the past week have been on the regional front. The current round began amidst the continued back and forth and firing rockets and IDF retaliations between Hezbollah and the IDF. And on July 27th, Hezbollah retaliated to an IDF airstrike that killed 4 Radwan Force members by launching over 100 rockets and missiles towards northern Israel. One of them, a Falak 1 Iranian-made missile, managed to penetrate Israeli air defenses and landed in a soccer field in Majd al-Shams in northern Israel, killing 12 children and teenagers during a youth event. While Hezbollah denied firing that particular missile, it was fairly substantiated by the IDF that the missile, which is only in Hezbollah's possession in Lebanon, was fired by the movement. And Sky News in Arabic reported on August 2nd that a UN investigation led by UNIFIL is also showing that Hezbollah is responsible for the firing of that missile. Israel vowed a harsh retaliation, and on July 30th, the IDF carried out an extremely high-profile assassination as warplanes fired missiles at a building in southern Beirut, killing Fuad Shukr. Shukr is arguably the most high-ranking military figure within Hezbollah. He's described by some as the overarching military commander or the movement's chief of staff. He's also known as Haj Muhsan and was a member of the Jihad Council, which is the senior leadership council of Hezbollah, and has played an instrumental role in the movement's violent development and the development of its capabilities over the years. Among others, he was involved all the way back in 1983 in the attack that Hezbollah carried out on U.S. Marines in Beirut, and he also was in charge of managing Hezbollah's missile projects in the movement in recent years. In many ways, one could say he was number 2 in Hezbollah after the leader Hassan Nasrallah, and his death has reportedly caused a major disruption in the organization's military structure. So that was one high-profile assassination. The following day, at 2 a.m. local time, a second, even larger operation took place with the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the official leader of Hamas. Haniyeh was visiting Iran to meet with the newly inaugurated president of Iran, and according to the New York Times, he was killed as a result of a powerful explosive device that was planted in his hotel room. That hotel unto itself was largely managed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Unlike the assassination of Fuad Shukr, Israel did not claim responsibility for the attack, and while the Mossad is, I would say, most certainly behind the attack, it is unlikely that Israel will officially claim the attack because of all kinds of international laws and regulations. Nonetheless, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran have officially blamed Israel for the assassination and have vowed retaliation. On August 1st, Iran hosted a meeting of the different militias it funds and cooperates with throughout the Middle East, and according to the New York Times and other reports, Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, ordered that Iran retaliate directly against Israel. In other words, not only activate its proxies, but actually carry out direct attack by the Iranian military. Al-Ahbar, which is a Lebanese Hezbollah-affiliated newspaper, later reported that 2 options were discussed in that meeting: a combined simultaneous attack on Israel from Iran and the associated militias throughout the Middle East, or separate staggered attacks in an escalatory manner. It was later published that Israeli and U.S. intelligence estimate that Iran will carry out a similar but possibly deadlier attack than what was carried out in April, which was the first time in history that Iran carried out its own direct attack against Israel. Other sources suggested that pro-Iranian militias throughout the Middle East may also engage in attacks against U.S. targets throughout the Middle East. This has been a prominent feature of the war. It began right at the beginning in October of 2023, largely died out at the beginning of 2024, however, has been escalating these attacks of militias against U.S. interests in the Middle East, and according to some intelligence sources, now that may be escalated as well. Washington Post reported that the United States has positioned 12 new ships in the region, including the aircraft carrier, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, as well as ships carrying over 4,000 Marines, all in order to bolster its positions in the area. Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, also announced that a new phase of the war is opening, and on August 12th, the Saudi Al-Hadath reported that the movement has been evacuating strategic installations and mobilizing military equipment, all in preparation of this escalation. In a moment of reading between the lines, however, I'm going to add that while clearly we are headed to some sort of regional escalation, it's important to note that in Nasrallah's speech, he also stated that Israel's response to the upcoming attack will determine how the escalation develops. In other words, Nasrallah is suggesting that Hezbollah is not going to launch an all-out war, so to speak, with no restraints, but rather is going to carry out an operation, and depending on Israel's retaliation, it will be determined if this becomes a war or not. Again, that's just reading between the lines about whether Nasrallah is intending a full-scale war or not. Obviously, remains to be seen. The result of all this has been that all regional actors are on extremely high alert. Everyone are waiting to see what's the next move in Iran. Multiple airlines are canceling their flights throughout the Middle East as everyone waits to see what is this escalation and when is it going to break out. Meanwhile, I've been asked a lot about the assassination of Haniya and what it means for the war more broadly. And in order to answer that, I'm going to start with making some order about who Haniya was within Hamas and where do things lie right now. Hamas's leadership is divided between the internal leadership in the Gaza Strip, headed right now by Yahya Sinwar, and the external leadership, which was headed by Ismail Haniya. Formerly, the external leadership is the superior one, quote-unquote, in charge of the movement's trajectory. In the current war, however, the situation has changed a bit. While Haniya was formerly Hamas's leader, it has been substantiated that neither he nor other prominent external leaders of the movement even knew about the plans to launch the October 7th attack. This was all done by the internal leadership of Hamas without the approval of the external leadership. And moreover, throughout the war, while the external leadership is the one who is officially negotiating with Israel via the different negotiators because they are officially the ones that are in charge, it has been repeatedly shown that the external leadership is unable to proceed with negotiations since they cannot make any agreement without the approval of the internal leadership, i.e. Yahya Sinwar. So the balance of power within the movement has shifted very much during the war. So what does this mean for the potential truce and the ongoing hostage negotiations? It's important to note that throughout the latter stages of the war, it was reported often from different leaks within the negotiating teams that Haniya was actually expressing the more quote-unquote moderate voice within Hamas's leadership, advocating for a truce more emphatically than Yahya Sinwar, who was expressing the more hardline approach, saying Hamas does not need a truce or a ceasefire and continue the fight, seemingly indefinitely. However, while Sinwar's hardline approach may therefore be strengthened by this assassination, it's also important to note that a series of other assassinations have taken place in the last weeks in the Gaza Strip, which may start to apply pressure on Sinwar to move towards a truce. Again, at this point, that's pure speculation. I will say, among others, that the death of Muhammad Def, the leader of the Al-Qassam brigades, in the IDF attack on July 13th has been confirmed in the last week by the IDF. In addition, Sharq al-Awsat also reported today that other top figures within Hamas, including Sameh al-Sarraj, as well as Rahi Mushtaha, who's a close associate of Sinwar, were also assassinated in the past week. So it may be that Sinwar is starting to feel more of the pressure as more of the leadership that's closer to him is being targeted. With regards to the more broader trajectory of the war between Israel and Hamas, we will only know about the impact of the assassination of Haniya and how it will affect the trajectory of the war once we see how Hamas's leadership is restructured. In theory, Haniya's deputy, Salah al-Arouri, would have been named leader. However, he was assassinated already in January in Lebanon. This would likely mean that under quote-unquote normal circumstances, one of Haniya's other deputies, maybe Musa Abu Marzouk or possibly Khalid Mashal, would have been named as the new leader. However, it is also very possible that within the new reality of the war and the internal Gaza leadership becoming much more important, that leadership will seize the opportunity to rise to prominence and take control of the movement, placing possibly Yahya Sinwar as the leader of Hamas overall, which would have a dramatic impact on the movement's trajectory. Alongside all this on the regional front, a couple of noteworthy highlights from the last week regarding what's happening in the Gaza Strip. The IDF pulled out of Khan Yunis after expanding its operation in the region over the past weeks. The military had originally announced that it was aiming its activity at Hamas's attempts to rebuild in the southern city, and it was estimated that the operation would last several weeks. The IDF pulled out from there quite surprisingly, possibly in preparation of this regional escalation, unclear. I will say, however, that the rezoned humanitarian areas that the IDF had announced in Khan Yunis are still in effect, so it is possible the military intends on operating again there in the near future. Obviously remains to be seen. In addition to that, there's been intensive fighting that was reported in the Al Bureij refugee camp in the central parts of the Gaza Strip. So this happened several hours after the IDF called upon Palestinian civilians to evacuate from the designated areas. The IDF has not operated intensively in the central camps in the Gaza Strip. It has more operated in and around them along the Netzarim corridor, so this may also indicate the next direction of the IDF in expanding its operation toward the central parts of the Gaza Strip. Remains to be seen. On the hostage and truce negotiations front, with the heightened escalations in the region, particularly with relating to the external Hamas leadership, the negotiations have been practically frozen over the past week. The Israeli Prime Minister's office reported today that an expedition to negotiations is going to travel to Qatar over the coming weekend, either on Saturday or Sunday. However, others raised a lot of skepticism about this announcement, suggesting that even if Hamas agrees to continue negotiations, it is highly unlikely that it will do so close to Ismail Haniyeh's funeral in the days of mourning. So it remains to be seen if those negotiations are actually developing or not, what is the trajectory they are going to take. Before I conclude, I want to say to my regular followers that I am sorry that I have not uploaded regular summaries. I have relocated across country in the past week, and this has caused me to be very behind in uploading my summaries. I hope to be back to uploading more regular reports in the coming week. Those are my highlights from the past week. I am Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and an Israel Institute fellow with a new affiliation now at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.